system?
I'd say a few things. I mean, one, most obviously, is why don't you just follow the civil rights laws of the country? Like, that's a very easy thing to do, and that nearly every elite university in the country is explicitly not doing. Okay, so that's one thing that they might consider doing. I think the second thing is they've got to be willing, and I have a friend of mine who's a geneticist, very bright, very bright young scientist. We have got to have a scientific community that is more open to unacceptable inquiry and that actually encourages bright young minds to go wherever the truth leads them. And I think that's where the universities have become almost quasi-theocratic or quasi-totalitarian societies. I mean, the way that I think about this is, I don't know what the voting, the voting in the 2024 election of Harvard University's faculty was. Okay, my guess is that at least 90% and probably 95% of them voted for Kamala Harris, right? Very brilliant Kamala Harris, of course. But, if you ask yourself a foreign election, a foreign country's election, and you say 80% of the people voted for one candidate, you would say, oh, that's kind of weird, right? That's like not a super healthy democracy. If you said, 95% of people voted for one party's candidate, you would say that's North Korea, right? That's totalitarian. That is impossible in a true place of free exchange for that to happen. And so I think the ideological diversity of these universities has to get much better. And I think that if that got better, if you actually had a place where people were open to debating these things and weren't terrified they were going to lose their job for saying something that was a little bit outside the Overton window, then I think the science would get better, the reproducibility would get better, the quality of the institution would be so much better. And that's what I want, because we need high quality universities. Right now the problem is we don't have them.
Absolutely. I think we have time for one more question.
Great.
This is usually an awful cliched question, but in this case it's extremely relevant. As I think you know, what American Compass's key activities, we have what we call our membership group. It's now more than 250 young policy professionals. Dozens of them are in the administration. They're senior staff on Capitol Hill. They're in think tanks. They are why I am so optimistic about the future and
Sure.
what I think is most important about our organization. And so it is not at all a cliche to ask, what is the advice you would give to younger people, admittedly not that much younger, who are deeply engaged in bringing about this kind of change? What do you need? What should they be doing more of? What are the things that maybe no one's doing because it's just not as much fun, but it's incredibly important? What are the things that never occurred to you needed to be done until you got to where you are now that you would like to assign to them all before you leave?
So I've reached this stage of my career, I guess, where I'm now the old guy.
You are the old guy.
To offer advice to all of you. Again, you started out by calling me an intellectual, and your final question is effectively, hey, old man, give advice to all of these young people here. But let me say a couple of things. So first of all, I think that you guys should go forth with a lot of confidence, because the conversations that are happening in this room and amongst all of you are far more interesting and far more influential in the policy conversation than almost anything else that's happening in Washington, D.C. There was a time in my life when I was incredibly, I didn't like to talk about trade policy because I didn't have a PhD in economics. Well, it turns out that a lot of the people who had PhDs in economics were flagrantly wrong, and they were given...
Would you like to